Welcome back to Globazam Podcast. Before we start this episode, we'll have a 1 minute silence for Mahsa Amini and all the brave Iranians who lost their lives during the protests. For this episode, I think it's very important for us to speak about our experiences that we had in Vienna. Myself and Sina, who's here with me today. How are you doing, Sina?
I'm very good, Arya. Thanks for hosting. Good to be back on the podcast. There's a lot of stuff to cover from our experience in Vienna. So yeah, really looking forward to going into it and also telling all you guys at home like what the experience was like. It was a very, very unique experience. So yeah, really looking forward to jumping into it.
Yeah, so we've got a lot to speak about. We'll also have a few guests on this episode. One of the guests, two of the guests actually, who we met out in Vienna, Mark Ogden from ESPN and Ian Herbert from the Daily Mail, two journalists who came out and they were covering the Uruguay game only. They weren't there for the Senegal game. I spoke to both of them, got their experiences, how they felt, and also got an interview with our good friend Mina, who was previously on our podcast a few years ago. She gave her experience from a female perspective, female Iranian perspective, and of what's going on with the national team, and so on and so forth. So, got a lot to cover. Before we do that, Sina, I want your first experience when you landed in Vienna. How was it? And how did you find it when you were out there?
So I guess to give background to everyone listening, Arya and I were planning to go to Vienna to watch these two friendlies quite a while before they announced that it was going to be behind closed doors. So they announced it was going to be behind closed doors. So we tried to go in with media. We applied for media passes. They said yes to us, which was cool for both games. And yeah, we turned up. Literally, we landed. I landed in Vienna and opened up my phone. I got an email saying, yeah, your access has been denied. So from the moment we landed, I didn't actually know whether we are going to go to the game or not. And they didn't give a reason. They didn't say why. They just said that the federation said no. I messaged Arya straight away, messaged you straight away, and you had the same thing. I think a lot of other media had the same reaction as well. So we didn't know at that point. So I think I had some problems with my hotel. So you actually went to the hotel, team
Yeah.
hotel, and it'll be good to, I guess, yeah. What was your experience from there?
Yeah, so I actually landed a little bit earlier than you. I think I was a couple of hours earlier than you. Then, of course, when I landed, as you said, I got the email as well. I'll read it out. We got it from the FIFA match agents who were organizing these two friendlies for Iran, called SLFC. We got the email. I'll read it out. It says, "Dear all, to our greatest discomfort, we inform you that the entrance to the match Iran versus Uruguay tomorrow has been denied. This decision was by the Iranian FA and not by our company. The SLFC feels very sorry for everyone who looked forward to the match, and we apologize for the inconveniences caused. If you have further questions, please contact the Iranian FA directly." So because they said that, please contact the Iranian FA directly, I thought, what's best to do is to just go to the Team Melli hotel, which was about 10 minutes away from our hotel. So we checked in, we landed, we checked in. Me and my dad were going, by the way, together. And we went to straight to the national team hotel, about, again, 10-15 minute drive with a taxi. And we got there. We were immediately greeted by some media, um, various media from the BBC, from ESPN, as I just mentioned, Ian and also Daily Mail. Ian from Daily Mail, Mark from ESPN, and a few others. Samindra, a good friend of ours, they were there and we said hi to each other, just saying hello, like obviously because we're the only journalists there. There's about 5 or 6 of us, and as soon as we kind of said our hellos, a few of the federation officials came down. Also the team lead photographer, his name is Naim Ahmadi. He actually came to me straight away and just said hi. He spoke to me a little bit. It was just wanted to see what my situation was. I explained it to him. I said, obviously, I'm coming from Scotland. I've come all this way, and you guys have denied us entry to a game that we guaranteed that we could go to. I don't understand it. We're just here to cover the game, and that's all we want to do because ultimately that's where our Goal Bazan podcast, we cover Iranian football. And he was like, okay, but this is a decision that's been made, and we told you guys earlier. We told you guys 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this was another federation official telling me this. He said to me, "Yeah, well, we told you guys a few weeks ago. You guys should have known already." And I was like, "No, we weren't. We only got told this afternoon that we can't go to the Uruguay game." So this back and forth, they were saying no, we were saying yes, and then all of a sudden, the federation vice president, Mehdi Mohamed Nabi.
By the way, actually, sorry to interrupt you, Aria. We were told less than 24 hours before the game that we weren't allowed to go. So it's like very, very like,
Yeah,
short notice. So
yeah,
when he was saying, yeah, you were told a few weeks ago, it's like, no, we were told literally like less than 24 hours
yeah.
before the game kickoff.
So Mehdi Mohamed Nabi, the vice president of the federation, came down, and he wasn't very, let's say, welcoming. You can hear it with the interview that I did with Ian and Mark. They also mentioned that they just didn't. He didn't seem like he wanted to speak to us as if we were there to. I don't know. They just didn't want to speak to us. Didn't seem very conversational. I asked him. Mark from ESPN asked me, can I speak to him? Can you translate for me? And I was just saying to him in Farsi, can you speak to this guy? He's from the UK. He wants to just talk to you about why we can't attend the game tomorrow. And he was like, no, I don't want to speak to him. I don't want to speak to him. And I was like, okay, but he's come all the way. And I turned my back, and then 2 minutes later, he's actually speaking to him. They're talking, and they're talking about, and he's Mark's explaining that we're just here to cover the match. We are covering England's national team, and you're playing England's national team. We want to cover this game. It's very important. And they just seemed dismissive. I explained to him that we have media passes confirmed by SLFC, and you guys have denied entry for media. And he was like, no, that's not the case. You guys were maybe told earlier, all these kind of things. It was just dismissive and just very, if I'm being honest, it was a bit rude. Like, I'm not really making it justice. If you were there, you would notice it yourself. He wasn't very nice to us. That's just my opinion. And ended up being that during these conversations, Carlos Queiroz walked in. We were in the lobby of the hotel, and all of a sudden, Carlos Queiroz walked through the lobby, and he went straight into the national team cafeteria that they made for the national team only. And he walked through, had his lunch. It was about 10 minutes. He was on his own having his lunch. Um, Again, there was about 5 or 6 of us media standing outside. He came out, and I think it was Samindra who asked him, can we interview you before training? And he said, yes, no problem. Just meet me outside on the pitch. And the pitch was actually behind the hotel. So we went out on the pitch. The coaching staff were setting up their drills for the training. Obviously, it's the day before the game, so it's just like a light training session for the team, I suppose. And we were based on the corner of the pitch. All the media, there was a few from, I think, VOA in America, also BBC Persian. I think that was most of it from Iranian journal. I think the rest of them were all just foreign-based journalists. And essentially, Queiroz walked over to us, did about a 15-minute media scrum. We asked him some questions for about 15 minutes. And then a few of the national team staff who recognized me, Ariane Ghassemi, the interpreter for the national team, he recognized me, said hello to me. The national team staff, a lot of them are familiar with Globazan, so they recognized me and they said hello. It was really nice of them. And as a result, subsequently, we were then allowed to go to the match in the morning. we got an email. So it says, "Dear all again, our company is happy to inform you that the Iranian FA decided this morning to allow all accredited media the entrance to the stadium. Please bring your press ID and normal ID, as already mentioned, blah, blah." So then we were allowed to go. And you can just, I mean, just take it from our perspective, the amount of stress I had going, arriving, not knowing for a fact that I'm going to be able to go to the game, and then being told I can't go to the game, and then going to the national team hotel, being treated like I wasn't allowed to go, and they didn't really want us there, as if we were just like a people who were just wanting something from them, not treated well, in my opinion. Even people like Mark Ogden, who's a senior writer for ESPN, and Ian, who's a sports journalist for the Daily Mail, not being treated properly either. And then obviously, yes, we were allowed eventually, but that was because we kind of almost forced it to happen, and that shouldn't have happened. I don't know how you feel about that, Cena.
I kind of felt a bit of embarrassment really, because this is a lot of, I guess, first impressions for media for, the Iranian national team. And given that we're playing in a World Cup against England, against Wales, against USA, big teams with, a lot of media as well, it wasn't a good impression of how we, do things. So that was my feeling towards it. Of course, personally, we flew all that way to go watch these games, and then we were kind of messed around. I didn't know whether we were going to go, whether we weren't going to go. So yeah, it was embarrassment as well as like confusion and kind of like frustration. Really, that was
Yeah.
all the different feelings.
And I think the question on everyone's mind, Arya, why didn't you interview any players? We were not like this between any players. I mean, the email we got, that was followed by a message from a federation official telling me, kindly note that there is no press conference. This is for the Uruguay game. Professional photographing and interviews at the mixed zone with players isn't allowed. So we were not allowed to do any photography, any interviews of any players, and there was no press conference at all. So they automatically limited us to everything to do with the national team. We were not allowed to ask any questions. Even when we were interviewing Queiroz, the national team, the federation officials standing right behind us, making sure that no questions were asked regarding the protests, asked regarding Masa Amini, for example. It was almost like a trial session for us. Like, to interview Kairos, it was like a trial session. Oh, if you don't ask us about this, you're not allowed you to go. If you ask us, and you're not allowed to go. Almost like that kind of way. And it felt a little bit intimidating to some extent, but it is what it is. We ended up getting allowed to go, and yeah, it was a bit of a mess, I've got to say. That's just my opinion. So Sina, we arrived in the NV Arena in St. Paulton. We got a train, and then we went over to the stadium. What was your kind of experience like outside the stadium? Obviously, there wasn't a lot of protests outside the Uruguay game compared to the Senegal game, which we'll come to later. But there wasn't a lot of protests, but there was a few things that happened. So what's your kind of experiences there?
It was very strange. Like for me, as with a lot of people listening, I've never been to a behind closed doors game. That's never happened before. So it was kind of a weird experience in that. And when we went there was a small group of people, I guess fans that were they weren't protesters. They were fans that wanted to come in, but they couldn't come in because they weren't with media. And after like a short wait, we got our media passes. We walked in, and we were kind of, it was strange because even though we were in the stadium, it was fairly strict about where we could sit and where we couldn't sit. I think we were moved around maybe 3 or 4 times. Like we sat somewhere and then they were like, no, you can't sit here. You have to sit here. And we're like, okay, fine. We moved around again. And then when they moved around us like a few times, I think it was because they wanted us to be as kind of far away from the Team Melli players as possible. That's my sort of interpretation of it. I don't know if that's kind of the vibe that I got. But yeah, it was just very sort of disorganized. We were kind of sitting somewhere and then like asked to move. And
Yeah.
eventually, I think it was just the three of us in. So me, yourself, and your dad in the sort of small media bit with a couple other people next to Uruguay fans.
Yeah, it was interesting. We were sitting, actually, if you don't know, the media section was behind the Uruguay bench. And we were just speculating, did they purposely put the Uruguay bench there so that we were sitting on the other side of the pitch, and then obviously the Iran bench was the other side. Now, we were very adamant, Sina, from the very beginning that we wanted to bring the full experience so that when we speak about it on the podcast, we have every, let's say, ammunition that we can to speak about. So we were very adamant, like we want to be able to go and sit behind the Iran bench because we want to know what they're speaking about. We want to know what's going on. We want to know what's actually happening. Everyone keeps saying players are not allowed to do this, all this sort of stuff. So we were like, okay, let's go and sit behind the Iran bench. And you remember what we did? We went and they kept saying, no, you can't go. And eventually, the security, by the way, was not very good at these stadiums. They're very, very, very poor like level of security, even though it was behind closed doors. Especially the Uruguay game, I'm just going to be honest, it wasn't very good. And we'll come on to that in the Senegal game, what we did there. But the Uruguay game, we went over to the Iran bench and we wanted to see what the vibe was, what was actually going on, what was the reason maybe there wasn't a lot of protesting between the players, what had happened between that communication between the federation officials and the national team. What I noticed straight away is that literally, even for the warm up, federation officials were there. They were keeping a close eye on everything going on, keeping a close eye on us. Like, even at some point, Omid Ebrahimi came over to us, just said hi to all the fans that were there who were allowed in, said hi to us. But then very quickly, as soon as that happened, I saw Nabi come up to us and just be like, no, these guys shouldn't be sitting here. These guys should be sitting all the way over there. And it was like as if like he thought we were there because we were gonna ask, some questions that were gonna be perceived in a way that he wouldn't like it. And I felt like as soon as I saw that, I was like, listen, this is very evident to me that the federation officials are not here for footballing reasons. It's more than that. They're here to really control the situation. And when we were told to then move back to our section, I was like, no, there's no doubt in my mind that they put us behind the Uruguay bench for a reason, right?
Yeah, what I will also say is that so at the beginning, when they first let people into the stadium, it was just kind of media, and there was loads of people queuing up to try to get in, like basically like making stuff up, like, oh, I know one of the players, like basically trying to jump the queue, but they couldn't come in unless they were media, so they were like trying very hard. Now, after maybe 30 minutes of us being in the stadium, I saw kind of floodgates open. They kind of like they let everyone in. So even though it was meant to be a behind closed doors game, just with media, all the people that were waiting outside that were hoping to just like see the players or whatever, they were let in as well, which was again like fairly interesting point. But more interestingly, what what you just alluded to there, Arya, is that when we were with Omid Ebrahimi, those fans were also taking photos of him and speaking to him. Only we were moved. So myself, Arya, and his father, only the three of us were moved. The other fans that came in who weren't with media, who weren't actually meant to be there because it was only meant to be a media game, they didn't get moved. They remained there. They sat comfortably. So it was only us three.
We got the impression that those people that were sitting in that section behind the Iran bench were probably either friends and family, or they were people from the embassy in Austria that were brought in. There was a couple of them who were actually part of the federation staff as well, because I saw them hanging about with the player, not the players, but the federation officials around the camp. So I think particularly for that game, they had maybe brought in some people just to make sure there was a control in the crowd. But then, as you mentioned, they ended up bringing the security. I mean, as I say, it was quite. I mean, their idea of behind closed doors, I don't know what it really meant, because ultimately, that stand was completely full by kickoff. Like, it was completely full. And there was a lot of Uruguayan fans. First of all, I think Uruguayan fans were allowed in. I think their embassy had given out tickets to some Uruguayans that live in Austria, but then some Iranian fans actually came in. And I didn't actually see this. I don't know if you saw it either, Sina, but I noticed it afterwards when I saw the photos. But behind the Iran bench, where the Iranian fans were mostly located, there was a couple of protesters that I didn't actually see. I didn't actually notice at all during the game, and
I didn't notice either,
I
but yeah,
saw
I
I
saw
saw the
photos
photo of it.
afterwards.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
photo of it. That was as Samindra was telling me, there was people that were holding up photos of Masa Amini, and also they were holding the Shir Khorshid flag, the flag before the revolution, and they were protesting. And then they were subsequently um moved. They were told to leave the stadium, and then I think they were taken out of the stadium. And from what I heard, is it was actually ordered by the federation officials that were there to get them to leave. So, and I want to make a point, and I made this point in the interview with Ian and Mark, but I'll just say it again here. When I was at the Iran against Algeria game in 2018, and it was in Graz. It was also in Austria. There was also a protest at the end of the match where people brought out the Shir Khorshid flag and they're protesting. And a federation official came round and told them to put that flag down. And police actually uh, said, no, this is a free country. It's free speech. You can do what they want. But then I just got told, and you'll hear it in the interview, that apparently police had told these protesters that you can't do that because you have to tell us 2 days in advance that you want to protest. So yeah, there was a little bit of a confusion as to what can and can't be done. But at the same time, why did you allow fans in the stadium if it was behind closed doors? So I think even from an Austrian perspective, there's a lot of mess, like a lot of mess in these games. But let's kind of go onto the players themselves. Okay, they scored the
There is
goal.
one more point I want to make, Ari, on this,
Sure,
because
sure.
I did read something that I want to dispel, because I read on I don't know which media this is actually, but I did read somewhere that the stadium didn't let in Iranian fans, but they let in Uruguayan fans.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
wasn't actually the case. So they actually let in everyone. It just happened that there was more Uruguayans than there were
Right,
Iranians.
right. That was
But yeah, I
because
saw that
that was
somewhere. I just
because
wanted to dispel that.
yeah, that was because at the beginning they were saying to the Iranian fans, "You can't come," and I think a lot of them actually left. But then some of them stuck around just before kickoff, and they were like,
Yeah,
"Okay, you guys can
yeah,
just come in anyway." So you just said, "Okay,
yeah,
just come in." So that's kind of what happened. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot more Uruguayan fans there,
yeah.
but there was obviously still quite a lot of Iranian fans too. It wasn't completely outweighed. Okay, so speaking of the match, obviously the goal by Taremi won the game 1-0. Overall, it was a good game for Iran. They played really well. Looked very organized, and it was a good performance, no doubt about it, against a very strong Uruguay team. However, obviously the goal was scored, and obviously it was an important goal, and it was a very good goal as well. However, they did celebrate, and there was a suggestion that maybe they shouldn't have celebrated. Sina, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I can see both sides, because it's Carlos Queira's first game. It's against Uruguay. It's against some Champions League winners are in the team. It's a great team to play against. It's a good challenge, and scoring in the second half when there's not that much time left. Like I understand, like, because it was a very good game. Um, However, I can see both sides. Like, I can see why people didn't want them to celebrate. So yeah, I kind of feel both sides for sure.
Well, I think for me, it was a bit bittersweet. In my opinion, looking back in hindsight, it probably would have been better not to celebrate. And also, although it is a very important game, we look at the preparation of the World Cup, it would have been a good gesture not to celebrate the goal. Maybe it would have been a good way to show that although it's an important game, that they still have a level of solidarity with the people and they're still thinking about them. That would have been nice to do, and I think they did do it in the Senegal game more so, but it maybe would have been nice if they maybe spoke about it beforehand. And if we do score a goal, it doesn't matter what happens, we're not going to celebrate it. That would have been a good way of maybe showing some support. Um, but then they didn't do really anything else other than that in that game to show support. They didn't do any wristbands. It wasn't like, for example, everyone's saying they wore black jackets before the Senegal game. We'll come on to that. I don't know if that was really a protest, but ultimately there wasn't anything from the players, and that was in my view, a bit disappointing because I was hoping they would do it, because there was a lot of people online saying, oh, this and that about the players. And we were like, no, but let's give them some time. Maybe they will do something. And it didn't. And to me, that was a bit disappointing. I was hoping to see something from them. And I know, no doubt about it, as we're saying throughout the podcast, there are people in the federation that were maybe stopping them from doing what they want to do, or what they can say, and and so on and so forth. But I feel like they could have. I still feel like they could have done it. Like, I feel like, in my opinion, if my humble opinion, I feel like they could have done something, and I feel like, to me, it was disappointing. That they didn't. I don't know if you agree, Cena.
I feel like they must have had a meeting of all the players and kind of agreed that, because this must have been playing on their mind for a while, especially with the build-ups to these games. And I feel like they must have had a meeting, the players, saying, listen, like, we've got a month to go to the World Cup. We want to do really well in this World Cup. We've got these friendlies coming up. We want to perform in them. Let's leave all of this stuff, any statements that we can make, until after these two games. And ultimately, I mean, we'll go on to Osman later, but ultimately that's what they did. So they didn't make any statements until after the game. But then after the two games, every single player posted on Instagram and Twitter and everything. Like, they made it very obvious what their thoughts were. So I think that's what they were doing.
I think that
But
comes
I
back
agree.
to that. Sorry,
Yeah, go
I
on.
think that comes back to, obviously, as I said, the federation officials maybe weren't allowing things to
Yeah.
happen. But I don't know. I don't know if that can completely stop them from doing everything. I think they could have still done something. That, like, for example, I don't see how not celebrating a goal would have been.
Yeah, there's definitely
Said you
small
can't do that.
gestures they could have done, such as that, or such as like armbands. There's
Even
small gestures they could
even
have
as
done, for
big as,
sure.
like, for example, there was a video of Bayron Van's birthday being celebrated during an Instagram video or whatever it was. I mean, I'm happy for them to celebrate the birthday. They can do whatever they want, but why do you need to share it on social media? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't see the necessity to do that during protests happening. Someone's just been killed, and you're out here celebrating someone's birthday like it's a party. I get it. I get it. I'm not trying to be a dinosaur, but I don't think they need to post it on social media. Maybe that's on the social media managers back, but these kind of things, I think, just, it's not good. As a national team fan, it doesn't feel right to see that happening. During these times. That's just my view. I don't know. But, unfortunately, that's what's happened. So we can't do much about that. Okay, so the game ended. Iran won the game, and we obviously, there was no press conference, so we went straight out to get a taxi back to the train station. But we did see some protesters there. Not as many, again, as there was in the Senegal game, which we'll come to, but there was a few people holding up banners and flags. Sina, I don't know, what do you remember from that, the sort of post game stuff?
It was very, like, small protests. I just maybe 3 or 4 people. It was very small. And again, it wasn't like a loud one, or they were just holding flags. So yeah, we just kind of like left from there.
Yeah, so we left. We didn't really have much interaction with anybody, but we did, of course, as I said, we met two people there: Mark Ogden from ESPN, Ian Herbert from Daily Mail, who were two journalists that obviously came over from the UK, and they did speak to some protesters that were there. And let's get their thoughts. I spoke to them earlier on. All right, I'm joined by Mark Ogden and Ian Herbert. Mark is from ESPN. Ian Herbert is from Daily Mail. We met you both out in Vienna. How are you all doing?
Good, thanks, Arya. Happy to be here.
Yeah, really good.
Good to have you guys on the podcast. Obviously, again, I met you guys out there. It was great to see you guys. It was great to be part of the of the kind of journalists going to the matches. What was your experience in Vienna like, Mark?
Well, obviously we got there and there was still a bit of confusion. And obviously I was in contact with you to try and find out details of press conference, team hotels. It was all very mysterious because generally when you do an international game, you'll have an itinerary in place that you'll know a few days before what's happening where, who's speaking when. And it was all a little bit up in the air, but obviously we had the situation ahead of the game with what was happening in Iran. So I did kind of anticipate a little bit of one or two issues, shall we say. But they kind of escalated, didn't they? Because we found out where the press conference was. We spoke to Carlos Queiroz, but then we had the situation where we were told the day before the game that we wouldn't be allowed in because the Iranian FA didn't want any media there. So it was different. It was understandable in the sense of the situation in Iran, but it was certainly a different build up to a game because when I planned the trip a month before, it was basically to go and see England's first World Cup opponents and the USA, because obviously ESPN are a US company, just to scout the team. It turned into something completely different, but something much better as a journalist, and it was a much better story to tell that we could actually, for people like myself prior to this that didn't understand the situation in Iran, to kind of tell people and maybe report on it and educate people as to what is going on there. And I much more preferred doing that than it would have been a simple scouting trip and talk about who takes the corners for Iran. It was a much more important piece to write.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ian, I think for yourself as well, was it similar? How did you find it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think Mark's sort of really captured it totally there. I think perhaps for me there was this sense that as well as it being a piece about England's opponents, it was also a piece about how playing USA and England in that group, for Iran there was a kind of a political significance to not losing those games, that they're very much seen as the West and perhaps adversaries maybe of Iran, you could say. So that seems to be the story, and I was sort of quite taken aback really by the way that the kind of the protest elements of it escalated and became such a big story. I mean, I was kind of vaguely aware of it when I headed out, but I think it was an education for me as well, really, to sort of understand more about just how important the story that this is, and just how seriously the players, not least, really take it.
Yeah, and we were there. We spoke to some of the federation officials in the hotel. They seemed to be quite unhelpful, to say the least. How did you find that, Ian? Did you think it was that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's very unusual for us to go to a game and to sort of go out there with accreditation, and thinking that we're in, which we had quite a few sort of emails back and forth giving us that assurance. And it wasn't a very formal accreditation process. It was just really the match agents who were kind of emailing back and forth. So it was slightly informal, but to actually arrive and then be told that your accreditation has been taken away from you, really, really unusual. And for those, Mark and I have been covering football for years, and yeah, when we went to the team hotel, it just seemed, on the back of that, some of the officials seemed to be just really totally unwilling to engage with the idea that might be reconsidered. The vice president in particular seemed to be reluctant not only to speak to us, but to also to speak to Persian speakers, and just really, you felt you were in sort of news journalism parlance, sort of doorstepping the guy, as we call it, when you're kind of really trying to just get him to somebody's ribs when they don't want to talk. And that's why it was such a surprise when I think it evolved so positively. The minute that Carlos Queiroz came out of a restaurant room and sort of saw a few of us and started to engage slightly, and then said he would speak to us at the training ground, everything seemed to change, including the accreditation issue.
Yeah, and that was the big turning point, wasn't it? When Carlos Queiroz kind of showed up, it kind of meant that he had the final authority or final say. But as you said, the federation officials didn't seem to want us to go to the game initially. Mark, why do you think that was the case? Do you think there was a reason behind that, by any chance?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were told at the outset that it was the Iranian FA that didn't want us there, and I was also told a few days prior to the game that it would be behind closed doors because the Iranian government didn't want people there, they didn't want fans there to protest. So I kind of knew, I knew there was obviously political interference in the game, because obviously FIFA statutes don't allow governments to interfere with national associations. But I think on this situation and others, it's very, very informal, very kind of behind the scenes. But so the sense I got when I went to the hotel and we tried to speak to the vice president, I kind of felt sorry for him in a little bit in some ways, because he looked terrified. He looked fearful of Western journalists. Now, who knows whether he thought that there were people in the hotel that were monitoring who he was speaking to. And listen, I appreciate the difficulties that anyone involved with the Iran team, whether it's players, officials, certainly people that have got family back in Iran, and this doesn't really apply to Carlos Queiroz, people that have got family there who have to go back to Iran, it must be so difficult for them that they must be, everything they do, must have to think through on so many levels, because if they speak to the wrong people, say the wrong thing, will there be consequences back in Iran? So I totally understand why he was reluctant to speak to us. He couldn't make eye contact with us, but I understand those reasons. And I made that point in the piece I wrote, and I had a bit of a negative response to that from some Iranian fans, suggesting that these players, this team, deserve no sympathy because they're representing the regime. Now, you know better than me, Aria, whether that's the reality or not. But you know, I think in the game and subsequently when they've made these protests to players, they have shown bravery. But it must be so difficult for them to do that, especially the players that are based in Iran. And I have no kind of doubt that a lot of pressure is weighing on the shoulders of people involved with the team and the squad.
No, I mean, we'll discuss that on the podcast, what we believe. I think that ultimately, personally speaking, the person in question here, Nabi, who is the vice president of the federation, he's in a position of power. He's in a position of he knows everything that's going on. I feel like personally, although I get what you're saying, Mark, I feel like he didn't do enough to make people who are coming in to spread the word or report on the national team feel welcomed. I didn't feel welcomed as an Iranian anyway. So that's the issue. I feel like that's just something that maybe they need to work on their own. I don't know. That's just my opinion, but hopefully it gets better. But
I mean, just to add, I do understand this. Ultimately, me and Ian work for English or American media. Now, if you're Iranian, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some suspicion there. Do these guys just want to write negative stories about us? Make it a political story. So I can see it from that side, that perspective. I work for an American company. Ian works for an English company. So, if you're working for the Iranian FA and this is what comes across, it's like, this is a trap. Now, it probably made things worse, but I can see the other side of the story, but I appreciate your insight is much greater than mine. So, I don't know how it works, but yeah, he's in a position of power. But is it a position of power that people above him have given him that he has to kind of answer to them? I don't know, but these are questions that we don't usually ask about the English FA and the Welsh FA. They're very different questions.
For sure, no, for sure. And Ian, obviously, you ended up going to the Uruguay game. They let us go in the morning. They seemed to come around, and obviously there were some there wasn't as many protests. I think in the Uruguay game than there was in the Senegal game, but there were some. Did you speak to anyone there at the game?
Yeah, well, Mark and I spoke to a couple of. Well, we approached a group of about, I don't know, a dozen guys in the car park outside. I mean, really, when we approached them and it became clear what we were asking them about, they did seem, they sort of separated quite quickly and kind of walked off. And we really, they clearly didn't want us to be asking them about this subject. And then one of them, I think Mark had spoken to, who sort of said in the immediate exchange, and Mark might remember the exact words, but some words to the effect of, everything's great, everything's fine. But it seemed a very unconvincing, he protested a bit too much, if you like, about how fine it all seemed. And then we'd then gone across towards the stadium to get our accreditation. And then he approached us again to say, look, I want you to know that, my sympathy, my thoughts, I'm with the people that are protesting, but you've got to remember that I'm having to go back to Iran at least once a year. People might know who I am, people in my town, there have been kind of reprisals against protesters, but I need you to know that this is how I feel. So that exchange, which Mark reported in his piece, seemed really important in terms of showing that there is protest, there is solidarity, and not everyone feels that they can say it.
What do you think of that, Mark? What was your account of that?
Yeah, that's right. Like Ian said, we went over to the guys, and he was. It was almost like they were joking and smiling. So yeah, you could tell he was being sarcastic. Yeah, everything's fine in Iran, everything's perfect, and it was almost like done with a kind of a knowing nod as to say, just don't ask the question at the moment. And he did come over to us, and he wanted to make clear that he also said in his town that I think 3 people have gone missing and three people have been killed, and and he was one of the guys that got in the ground, and then what was supposedly a behind closed doors friendly became just the main stand was virtually full of Uruguay fans and Iran fans, and then we saw the guys with the protest banners were taken out. So it was interesting, and I was pleasantly surprised that there were protests inside the ground. I didn't expect it, but again, very brave of the people to do it. We don't know if they're from Iran or if they live in Iran, if they've got family in Iran, but still very brave. And I think it's courageous of any protester to make these statements, considering the ramifications potentially back home. So, I mean, I came away from it thinking that there's a massive, massive groundswell of anger and readiness to protest against the regime, which I didn't expect. If you compare it to what's happening in Russia, again, I think that Mina and both been to Russia quite a lot in recent years, and I think we're both. You can see that again. There's the same sort of groundswell of opposition to what's going on in Russia, but in Iran it seems much greater, much more ready to continue. And who knows what will happen? But it opened my eyes to the levels of protest in Iran and the willingness of people to make their point, and it escalated after we came home when the players wore the black tracksuits against Senegal and made that point, and some of the players were tweeting things and changing the profiles. That for me was amazing, and it's not been given the coverage it deserves, I don't think.
Ian, obviously Mark mentioned there were some protests in the stadium as well. I think they were holding up like the Shira Khorshid, the 1979 pre-revolution flag. What kind of things did you notice in the stadium? I didn't actually see it. We were sitting quite far away from anyone else, but what did you see there?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I didn't see it either. It was a freelance journalist who was very helpful on that trip. Who pointed it out.
Samindra,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He pointed it out to me, and he took, I think, the photograph of the guys just holding up really what was it's a sort of kind of an A4 size piece of paper, with a protest sort of emblem on it, and then he'd taken photographs and video of these 2 guys being sort of marched away through the VIP area and out to the back of the stadium. So yeah, I mean, it was strange because the following day, one of the news reporters on my paper had actually got hold of the Austrian police and had asked about what was going on and how this could have happened. And the sort of response they got was that if you're going to do a protest in Austria, you've got to give 48 hours notice, which was just preposterous because, I mean, it wasn't as if it was kind of an organized street protest. It was a couple of guys holding up a piece of paper. So what struck me about that was the kind of the knots that the Austrian police were tied up in, trying to justify their actions.
That's interesting that you say that, because actually I remember I was in the Iran against Algeria game back in 2018. It was a friendly between Iran against Algeria in Graz, and even at that game there were some protests, people holding the old flag, and some of the federation officials came over to the protesters and said you need to put it down, but Austrian police actually said that no, it's a free country, it's free speech, they can do what they want. So I'm surprised that they actually said that to you or to your friend about it being a 2-day notice.
Yeah, I think that's probably what surprised Mark and I talking about at the time. We were just probably astonished that in a Western democracy like that, sort of a country which is a bit like those we know best, that would happen. And I think, but there was the evidence was kind of categoric, and definitely police who were. I mean, there were some Securitas officials as well. You could see the on the photographs there were security staff companies as well. Securitas was one of them. Well, they were wearing Securitas uniform top, but there were definitely Austrian police who were behind it, who were at the center of it, because we saw them walking back out towards the exit. So it was definitely police. Strange, very strange.
Yeah.
And also the other very odd thing about it is Mark mentioned, it's behind closed doors, and then there were loads of Uruguayan and Iranian fans, and I mean, somebody was sort of suggesting they might be VIPs, but I mean, they didn't look like VIPs. It's
No.
pretty weird bit about why sort of 200 people ended up in the stadium anyway. Never got to the bottom of that.
I heard that they ended up getting allowed in last minute. Like they also were out to the stadium, they were just said you can just come in anyway. That's what we heard, but I don't know if that's true or not. Okay, final points on the actual game itself. Iran won the game 1-0. And obviously both of you being from the UK, we're playing against England and Wales. Ian, obviously, you're from Wales, and Mark, you're from England.
Thank you.
How do you see that performance then going to the World Cup?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'll start seeing England the first game, so I'll take the Englishman's approach. One thing that I was impressed about was, I mean, Uruguay are a good team. I won't say they're a grade A team, but certainly probably the tier below, and they're a good experienced international team with players like Suarez and Darwin Núñez. And they're a very physical team. They're a very hard team, Uruguay. And Iran more than handled the physical side of it against Uruguay. And I thought that to the point where they made Uruguay look over the shoulder at the physical side of it. So Iran are a team that can look after themselves. They are very organised under Kyrgios, and they will be. So I think when they play England, it will be a difficult game for England. It'll be very much a game of attrition, and I think Iran will try to make it that. I think one thing that Iran probably lack is the killer pace up front, which you need against the top teams to make a difference. But I think the key in this game, with it being the opening game, England will be under so much pressure to get off to a good start. And there'll be, as we know, that they will go to this game with a huge kind of, I won't say arrogance, but the misplaced belief of a lot of the fans that, it's only Iran, it'll be fine, we'll win this 3 or 4-0. The classic, underestimating your opponents. And I think they'll be surprised. I think it'll be a surprise that Iran will match England physically, and they've got a coach who will have a plan. So I do think England are the favourites, but I think that Iran have definitely got it in them to make life very difficult for England. And if I can just give a mention to the USA, because obviously ESPN a US company, I've seen a bit of the USA. That is, I imagine that's the big game for Iran for so many reasons, and that is a game that I think Iran can win. I think the USA right now are in a very strange place. They've got some good players like Christian Pulisic, but I do think that Iran can get a result there, and then it sets up the Wales game, which is that the way? Maybe I've got the wrong order. I'm not too sure, but obviously, I think second place is up for grabs. Wales, Iran, the USA have all got a fair chance of second place.
Thanks for that.
I just actually wonder as well. I mean, Mark, there's all this kind of thing about England. They always expect to win everything, and they are under a lot of pressure. I mean, they've had some poor results. That Gareth Southgate's under pressure. They're coming into the tournament in a far less positive place than they did, I think, the Russia World Cup. And I don't know whether this is overstating it, but it just strikes me that the sort of the kind of the solidarity that the players have shown in the last week, really, since we were all together out there. I just sort of kind of wonder whether, in some strange way, this might not be quite a unifying factor. I mean, if the protests and that level of protest is still, strong in what is really only about 6 weeks or so, 7 weeks till the World Cup, and here are a bunch of players who are presumably going to be told, we don't want you protesting. I don't know. It could give them a real sense of solidarity, and I thought they were very good. They shipped the ball around quite quick. They were fast technical players. I think they could be a real threat.
Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully we get to see you again at some point, and all the best. Thanks a lot for that.
Great.
Sorry.
Cheers.
Okay, we're back. Appreciate Mark Ogden and Ian Herbert's time. Let's speak about our trip overall. When we got after the Uruguay game, Me and my dad, we went to the city center of Vienna. We witnessed protest there as well, and we did witness it there very evidently. There was actually, they've got this big long road, and there was one side of it with protests and the other side of it with protests. So there was two sides of the road filled with protests, and it was interesting to see that on the day. Sina, did you see anything?
I actually, between the two games, I went to Prague, so I didn't actually see any protests while I was in Vienna. I didn't encounter anything.
Yeah. And then obviously, we spent the weekend there. Me and my dad, we had a good time. Actually, it was good. We went to the Croatia against Austria match in the national team stadium. And actually, as we were there, my phone wasn't working. It had no reception, and the Instagram story that Osmond put up was posted that night. So I got to my hotel and I saw it. And I was reading through it, and it was interesting. And it was just basically him saying, I'll read out here. So it says, because of the restrictive laws placed on the national team, I couldn't say anything, but I can't take it anymore. Look what you do to our people. This will never be erased from our consciousness. Shame on you. You kill easily, and long live Iranian women. And then he actually ended up deleting that post. And from what we heard, now we can't confirm anything. This is just from what we kind of what we heard from rumblings going on here and there, that there was some sort of a disagreement between the national team players. I think maybe some of them were saying maybe you shouldn't have posted that. Maybe you should have waited after the national team camp to post that. Obviously, he deleted it. And I think there was just a little bit of back and forth. I don't know exactly what happened, but he posted a story. Very brave of him to do that. Very brave. I don't think he's you've got to say, one of the more brave Iranian footballers that I've kind of known for a long time, and kudos for him for doing so, and using his platform to speak out during the national team camp. Obviously, they weren't allowed, as he just mentioned, to say anything, and it's good that he did that. That he was willing to do that, but obviously he had to delete it, and then I think that was the day before the Senegal game, or maybe a couple of days before it. But yeah,
it was like 2 days before. Yeah, so he deleted all his other posts, and it came at a critical time because no other player had said anything about this situation. That's the main thing about this. And of course, after they celebrated the goal against Uruguay, there was a lot of, I guess, pressure on the players as to why they've done that. And I think this was either like brave, impulsive decision from Osman. I know Osman, like I definitely do stand with him in what he said, but he's probably the more of the bravest and also impulsive players in the national team.
Right. No, I mean, here's the thing. As you mentioned, there was a lot of people being angry with the national team players for not saying anything during the Uruguay game. And I think, as you're saying, when you say impulsive, I think maybe in him it was very built up. He was upset that people were feeling that way about the national team.
Yeah,
I feel like he ended up putting up the Instagram story, which rightly so. I'm not saying he shouldn't have. I think he should have, but I think it would have been nice if the rest of the national team players kind of followed suit. And okay, maybe the federation staff were saying you have to delete it, you have to do this, you have to do that. But I think in these situations, I think the players have to come together. I don't think that I should be hearing things about, players were arguing about this and that. That shouldn't be happening, in my opinion. I think they should all have a solidarity about themselves and be able to share a team's opinion if they can. It's not easy, but if they can, because at the end of the day, we're going to a World Cup. We're representing a nation, so it's important.
I feel like they all think the same. They all have the same views for this. I think the majority of the team, at least. I think the thing they disagreed on, though, was how they actually handled the situation and communicated it. That was the part that they disagreed on. And I think that's when the division came in that I guess you talked about with the rumors. Whether like we don't know how correct it is or how incorrect it is, those divisions.
Yep.
By the way, as well, it is important to highlight this team was already slightly divided after the whole Skocic situation. So
Sure.
it might even be an artifact of that, right? Like we don't know.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a good point. That's a good point. So yeah, there are many reasons to like why he deleted it. I think he was definitely maybe asked to or forced to by federation official, maybe by the team, maybe by some teammates, maybe he did it himself. I don't know. So these kind of things I would like to ask, but I don't have the answers to that. The morning of the Senegal game, we decided that we are gonna go to the national team hotel. And we're going to go because, first of all, we weren't actually guaranteed that we were going to go to the Senegal game. There wasn't any communication actually all the way to getting there. We didn't know that we were going to be allowed in. We were allowed in, but we didn't actually know. So that was one of the main reasons why. Again, we wanted to do the same thing we did for the Uruguay game, go and speak to them and see if we can get in. But also, we wanted to meet some of the players, see what their thoughts were on what's happening. We spoke to Jahanbakhsh and Izzatullahi, and we also were going to do an interview with Sky Sports News. So, Sina, give your kind of thoughts on that morning.
It was actually very exciting because it was like getting interviewed by Sky Sports. It kind of like, I guess
shout out to Kovis Solekol who gave us that fantastic interview.
And also shout out to you guys listening, because without you guys that wouldn't have even been possible in the first place. So it was a very cool experience, and hopefully you'll see us on Sky Sports before the England game. That's kind of what we talked about. But yeah, very surreal experience. We spoke to Alireza Jahanbakhsh and Izzatullahi, as Arya said. And yeah, very nice guys as well. And they kind of reiterated what we said earlier of, putting pressure on the players and things like that, to make statements. And I think the aura that I got from them was the same thing as what I said before. They were kind of uncertain about what they needed to do in this situation. You need to remember as well, these are young guys, like a lot of them. They've probably just grown up playing football their entire lives. They haven't had to deal with this sort of situation. It's very difficult for them to know what to do. And maybe the easiest thing to do in this situation is to just follow what everyone else is doing. So that's the kind of aura that I got from both of them. I've got to
disagree with Sina. Sorry to cut you off. I've got to disagree because I feel like, although you're right, I think the age is a very important point to make. I think it is because obviously Saeed, he just turned 26. Jahanbakhsh a little bit older than him. I don't for Jahanbakhsh, no, I don't have that. But I think the reality is these guys, the truth is they have massive platforms, right? So they all have over millions of followers on Instagram, and whether that should be whether we should judge them on their followers on Instagram or their popularity or their celebrity, I don't know. That's not for me to decide. But I do feel like there is a responsibility that they do have. Right, there's no doubt about that.
For sure.
They have
no,
a
I agree. I
responsibility.
definitely agree with you there.
So,
I definitely agree with you there.
You're right. Jahanbakhsh, Izzatullahi, again, thanks a lot to them for coming over to speaking to us, and they were very nice. We asked them some questions. They were, as you said, they were a little bit confused as to what they should have done, what they shouldn't have done. They were, they were saying that the camp. This we're obviously naturally going to ask them some footballing questions. They're happy with the camp. Queiroz seems to have turned things around for them. But again, it's a bit of a they said it's a little bit of a bittersweet situation. Of course it is, because of what's happening back home. And obviously they are now posting stories, and they're doing so some of the players are wearing armbands in their league games, but there's things they couldn't have done during these camps in their view. Now, obviously I've mentioned what I believe they could have done, but in their view they couldn't. So they mentioned that, and we appreciate them for talking to us, and it was good to see them and give us their time. But we weren't actually allowed to do that. We were actually not supposed to speak to them. We kind of did it because we wanted to, because we needed to be able to get the full experience, right? So we went there, we weren't expecting to speak to anyone. We just kind of went there and just said, let's just try our best, right?
Yeah, guaranteed as well. If any of the federations saw us talking to the players, like that would have been shut off very, very quickly. We we literally intercepted them between their the elevator
Breakfast.
and the breakfast room. Like
Yeah.
it was, they didn't expect to speak to us. We didn't expect to speak to them. And it was just by luck really that.
Well, I mean, the thing is, they recognized us. They know us because obviously we've interviewed them. They've been on our podcast before. They knew who we were. It wasn't as if we were just some strangers coming up to them and just saying hi. They knew who we were, and I actually feel the other players knew who we were as well. So that wasn't like a surprise to them. It was more like we were there, and we were like a little bit. Our guards were up a little bit because we didn't want to go and then not get allowed to go to the stadium because that's not what we're there to do. We were actually there to do an interview with Sky Sports News, but obviously we were going to use that opportunity to do as much as we could to get some information, and we got a little bit of information. So that's the best we could have done. And I think, if we had, to be fair, there were some federation officials there. A few of them were looking at us. We were just being a little bit, we were just ignoring it. So we weren't going to do any interviews because it was impossible to do so. I think that would have been a complete no-no. But we did what we could do, and we got what we needed. Obviously did our interview with Sky Sports News, and that was really good. And we then, obviously, that was the morning of the game. We went over to the Motion Invest Arena, and right away, Sina, lots of protests outside the stadium.
Yeah, there was probably about. This was already pre-planned, by the way. If anyone was wondering, like it was pre-planned.
Yeah, good
I think,
point. You should mention that we were told before the Uruguay game that there was a planned protest, so there was already one that was ready to go.
So already a lot of police presence, already maybe triple or quadruple the level of security than there was in the first game. So yeah, that's when we started. Even though the weather was like really bad, like so there was good numbers in terms of that. So yeah, there were maybe when we arrived, maybe 40 protesters with like megaphones and speakers and things.
Yeah, about 40, 50. There was about a good number.
Yeah,
it was a good number.
Yeah. And so we just got our passes and walked in, same as before. But it was very apparent that the noise that they were creating, it was like a pure cacophony. It was going to be carrying on the whole game. And I don't know if they were doing this is very speculative, but the music they were playing before the game, which is normal for any sort of game, that music was very loud. It was louder than I was like used to in a lot of other stadiums. I don't know, maybe I'm speculating here, but I feel like they made it louder to drown out the protesting noise. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making stuff up. I don't know what you think.
In the stadium, right? Yeah. I think you're right. There were you're for sure.
It was louder than usual, in my opinion.
100%. I didn't actually. We didn't even discuss this, me and you. But I think looking back at it, yeah, the music was obnoxiously loud. Like it was very, very loud, and you could see. I think the federation officials that we were there next to, which will come on to why we were there next to, we could see they were a little bit put off by it, but they were kind of trying to ignore it at the same time. And no, the protesters, they had full voice. You could hear them. It was very clear. It was very apparent what they were saying and what they were there. How many of them were there? It was very apparent. Like you could tell, even if you weren't looking at them, you could tell like with your ears. So yeah, we went to the but at this point, when I was speaking about on my Twitter, I was saying about how stressful it was. We didn't even know that we were going to get allowed in. Like imagine like just about 4 games or 4 days between the 2 games, and we had no communication whatsoever that we're going to be allowed in. I tried to ask some people, but they were like, yeah, you might get allowed in, you might not get allowed in, we don't know. And imagine how stressful that is. You've paid for a trip yourself off your own back, and you're there on behalf of Golbazan, whatever it may be, and you don't even know that you're going to go to the game. So we were already stressed out, and it was in my view, it was good to see that there were more protests this time than there was in the Uruguay game. There was not really there was nothing, to be honest. It was very little. This game was a lot more, and it was more apparent because it was more people were there to voice their protest. So that was good to see.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing. I don't know if you wanted to save this for the end of the podcast or not, but Gareth Southgate, England manager, was also at the game, and he had difficulty coming into the stadium because I feel the security thought he was part of the process.
So
It's quite interesting.
There was a lot of police there. So compared to the first game, there was maybe maybe 20, 30 security guards and no police. This game, there was a lot of police and there was more security guards. But honestly, like, again, I don't mean to be offensive to anybody that was working there. I don't. But SLFC, the FIFA match agents, and we'll come on to the interaction we had with them at the Senegal game. You know about it, Sina. But they were really badly, like, managed, like the security. They didn't really know the responsibilities. I feel like if in their view they were thinking of doing a behind closed doors game, they didn't do it properly, in my opinion. If that's what they were trying to do, I'm not saying they should have tried to do it. I'm saying if they were trying to do that, they weren't doing it properly. So this game, in my opinion, wasn't even ready to be a behind closed doors game. Like, it was very poorly managed. And in my, it was like you might as well just let the fans in at this point, because you're not very good at managing it. That's from what I noticed.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the key moments where you felt that way, and I felt that way as well. The one thing I will probably highlight for them is that they've probably never had to deal with a situation like this in any game that they've had to organize ever. Like, it's very, very unique that this has happened.
Sure.
I'm not saying it's like good or bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's very unique, and for these guys, like, they've probably never had to deal with this, and to that level of scale as well. So they weren't very well prepared, and a lot of them were very, like, angry and aggressive towards us, not because I felt like they were aggressive people, just because I felt like they were given very strict rules by the people above them. And they were very scared about, leaving a bad impression, so they were obviously conveying that anger towards us as media.
So this is what I'm saying. I think the federation had actually ordered them how they must conduct themselves, and I think there was a bit of confusion. Like, so we'll come on to it. So basically, me and Sina, because what had happened was they put all the media or whoever else was in the stadium on the other side of the pitch. So the benches were on the other side. So we were like sitting opposite them. And we were like, no, this is not going to work for us. Like, we've come all this way from the UK. We're going to get the full experience because we want to, again, provide it on the podcast, make sure that whatever we say isn't rubbish, it's real. We want to be able to offer that to the audience. So we walked around the pitch, and we went round to literally where the players come out of their changing rooms, literally at the door. And we were greeted by some people there, like some security, some again, there were some federation officials there as well. Nabi was there. There was there was a lot of the national team staff. Again, they recognized us and they said hi to us. I'll give them a shout out. Mikel Moreira, for example, João Peixeiro, Ricardo Silva, Roger Dessá, all these guys, very, very respectful to us. And of course, Alexander Lopez, the goalkeeping coach, they're very nice to us throughout both these matches, and they always greeted us with a lot of respect, which is good to see. And I really appreciate it. But ultimately, we went round, Sina, and do you want to explain what we did?
Yeah, another thing like to highlight is that it probably wasn't on purpose this time that we were that far away from the players, just because the seats on the opposite side where the players were and their bench was, the seats were really, really poor. I don't think they were like very well maintained or whatever. So I think they probably planned this from before. It was like the fans would sit on the opposite side where the seats are more comfortable.
Yeah, but it didn't work. It didn't work for us, though.
No, so we walked down, and we kind of just like, I don't know how they let us go this far, to be honest with you, but we walked so far, like we were literally on the pitch. Like, we started on the sort of tunnel area, and then we walked onto the sort of touch line, and it was just Arya and I, like, from media on the touch line. It was kind of surreal, to be fair. But yeah, so we walked down the touchline, and we could kind of hear the players talking, and some of them were talking about the protests that were happening outside. So yeah, it was a very unique and surreal experience. And I don't know. What else do you want to add to
Yeah,
that experience, Arya?
so there's a few things I want to add to that. So we walked over to, as I said, where the players warming up, and we were standing literally shoulder to shoulder with the coaching staff. Right, we were literally there with the coaching staff, and the players were warming up right in front of us. Right, so we were there, we were right amongst it. And I think good for us to do that because we wanted to, again, I wanted to experience what it was like to be part of the national team because we wanted to know what was really going on. And there was a few anecdotes that I want to discuss. One of them is regarding the protest. So there's one chant that was very evident throughout the game and before the game by the protesters, and they kept on shouting Ali Karimi, Ali Karimi. Obviously, Ali Karimi has been very vocal on social media, on Twitter. He's actually got a Twitter account now. He's been very vocal regarding the protests, regarding the government, regarding what's going on in Iran, regarding women, and regarding pretty much everything. And he's actually had his house. I think is it like he's had his house broken into, but he doesn't. He's not actually living in Iran. He lives in Dubai, and yeah, I think he's had people. So the police in Iran are very much on high alert with him because of what he's done on social media, and the protesters were celebrating his name essentially before the match. And one of the things I saw was Khalilzadeh. Shoja Khalilzadeh. He was actually injured for this game. They actually told us Khalilzadeh is injured. So okay, cool. So he was off the pitch. So he was standing there talking to Omid Ibrahimi. We were about 5-10 yards away from them, and I could just hear it faintly. He was saying in Farsi, he was like something along the lines of Ali Karimi ke duste mane, Ali Karimi ke refiqe mane, Hachi Ali Karimi begem sama gush midim, or in English translation is Ali Karimi is my friend. Whatever he says, I'll listen to it. In those kind of lines, that's what I heard. And actually, subsequently the next day, he actually posted a story with Ali Karimi on his story, and we've actually tweeted about it. So I think that's probably what he was saying, and I think he was a bit confused as to why they were protesting with Ali Karimi's name, and it's just something I noticed. I'm not saying whether I have an opinion on that. It's just what I noticed. So they were definitely talking about the protests, the players. There was one moment as well. I don't know if you saw it in Cena. One of the protesters kind of walked round the stadium to one of the older entrances that they maybe don't use anymore, and kind of went above the gate and started shouting at, I think it was Niazman, and I think he said something along the lines of like Payam Bomardumbash, or like Payam be with the people. And security were, again, they were a little bit oblivious to what was going on. And one of the Federation officials came over and said, you have to move him. You have to move him. So they ended up moving him, and they ended up moving him right back to where the protesters originally were. So
after a lot of hesitation, though, like they didn't really know what was
they
going
were
on.
there.
Yeah,
they were there for I think 10 minutes. And I think the Federation officials came over and said, you have to move him. And it was a bit. Again, I don't really know what was going on with everything around the stadium. But again, kudos to the protester. He came all the way around, he got over the fence. I couldn't believe he actually managed to do that, to be fair to him. But fair play to him for being able to actually step up over it and still get his protest in, which was really the only protester that I think managed to get anywhere near the game or near inside the stadium the whole time, not mistaken.
yeah. I mean, the police were pretty sort of stringent.
Yeah,
outside.
He was pretty much the only one who could really do that that we saw. So the police didn't allow anything else to happen during the game. So obviously we had that experience of being pitch side, and we were there, and then they warmed up, and then they went away. So then someone Qudus, obviously we interviewed someone Qudus last year. He recognized myself, said hi to me, said hi to Sina, and we were just speaking to him, and all of a sudden, the security comes up to us, and he's like, you guys shouldn't be here. He was very, very loud. He was like, you guys shouldn't be here. You guys should be, you guys are part of the media. You guys don't deserve, you guys, if you do this again, we'll rip up your badges and you can't come back. And I was really shocked. I was like, so you allowed us to come all the way around to be pitch side, and now you're just telling me that I can't even be here. Why did you not tell me that 2 minutes ago?
We were there for ages as well.
Yeah, we were there
he
for
chose a really
we were there for the full warm up.
Shouting us in German is like, do you really think we would be German coming here? Like,
But
we're obviously not German.
I'm very, very happy that we experienced that, because I feel like if we didn't, we wouldn't have noticed that guy for protesting. We wouldn't have noticed what Kaiser just said. You know, there was a few things we didn't actually notice. We would have, if we were on the other side of the pitch, we'd never have noticed these things. So it's good that we've been able to cover that on the podcast. And then the protests were continuing throughout the full game, and it was very evident. It was very audible. We could hear what they were saying, and and obviously the game ended 1-1. They didn't celebrate the goal. One thing I want to just finish off on is the black jackets, Cena, because they wore black jackets for the national anthem.
This is the thing. A lot. There's been talk on the media saying that both Western media and Iranian media actually saying how the players wore the black jackets as a sign, just basically covering up the flag. I personally don't buy that. I don't think that was the case, because they were wearing the black jackets for a while, and if you watch like any football match, that does also happen in other games. So I don't think they did that. I mean, if they did, then fair enough. It's not something that would surprise me, but personally, I don't think they did it for that reason.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with that. I don't think it. Well, it might have been. You don't know, but I don't think it was to like cover a flag or cover a badge. Maybe they were just wearing black jackets to commemorate the deaths that are, the killings that are happening in Iran.
But it was a very cold day as well. I should
as
say.
I said, it was freezing that day. I'm not like even the Senegal players should have been wearing jackets. It was freezing, and it's not that uncommon that both one team does wear it and one team doesn't. So I can't really go into that too much depth. You know, I just don't know. I don't know the full situation. Whether that was the case, I don't know. I really don't know. And I do know that there were a few players that didn't sing the national anthem, such as Majid Hosseini, such as Sadegh Moharrami. They didn't sing the national anthem. I know that, but I don't know if that was anything to do with the protests. So yeah, that was it. And then the final thing is obviously Osman's goal. Didn't celebrate this time. It was much more of a muted celebration. And that was really it in terms of protests by the players overall.
One thing I will actually mention about Osman, because I was asked this a couple times, is that some people said that Osman was dropped from the squad because of what he said on social media. And I just wanted to reiterate that wasn't the case, because it wasn't just Osman that was like rotated. It was pretty much, I'd say, I don't know, 8 out of the 11 players were rotated out of that squad compared to the Uruguay game. So it wasn't just him, and it like Carlos Queiroz wants to experiment with different teams. I mean, do you really think Carlos Queiroz would change his footballing style based on this? I don't think so. Like, he wants to experiment with different lineups, different formations, different teams. In my opinion, it's had nothing to do with it. And then eventually he came on and scored the goal. So obviously he's still in the plans, you know. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
Perfect. Okay, let's go on to my interview with Mina, a fan of Team Millie, who we've had on the podcast before. Let's hear her thoughts. All right, I'm joined by Mina, a good friend of mine. We've had you on the podcast before. I think it was a couple of years ago when Iran played against Cambodia. That was the time where women were allowed in the stadium for the first time. Glad to have you back on the podcast. How are you doing, Mina?
Hi, hello from Stockholm. And it's so nice to be back on the podcast. For sure, it was a different time when I joined last time, and it was women being let into stadiums for the first time in Iran. It was very emotional times as well, but it was completely different. And it's one of the things about Iran that things change very rapidly. I can't believe it was 2 years ago.
I think it was really been the first time in over 40 years that happened, and now it's happening more. but it's still not to the standard that we expect. We want to happen more in more stadiums and more matches, but hopefully that continues. We'll see what happens. But obviously, I want to get your thoughts. Obviously, from a women's perspective, what's happened in Iran the past week or so. Obviously, the killing of Mahsa Amini, and we saw many protests in Iran all over the world. This happened during a national team camp. What is your perspective on that?
I have been as well following the news, just like you. I live outside of Iran, and I've been following the news in Twitter and social media, just like you. And I've also been concerned about the views on national team and what happened during the camp, which is in so many levels. It was a sensitive time. It was first camp that Kairosh was back, and then suddenly everything got upside down before he could settle with Emeli. So of course, I just want to say that it feels a little bit strange in these times to be talking about football. I want to quote Jurgen Klopp, because I'm a Liverpool supporter as well, that he says football is the most important of the least important things. And I completely agree with that. So it's in our circles, this is very important, but at the same time, in the scale of what's happening to our country, it's not important at all. But it has put Team Melli on the spotlight because people have expectations of how they would react to what has happened. A young woman was killed in the custody of the police, and this became start of a big movement of very young people putting their lives at risks for making change. And we have seen, of course, Team Melli players to be outspoken about women's rights in the past, mostly about women being in the stadiums. There has been a lot, I think, about from all of them, but I can remember very vividly of Jahan Bakhsh, Azmoun, and of course Masoud Shajai and Ashkan Dejaga. And then it has been, I think we have seen messages from all of them when Sar Khodayari killed herself out of after being charged with criminal investigation for trying to enter a stadium as a boy. And so there have been, and I think Azmoun and maybe Masoud Shajai, they have always been very supportive of like a women's national teams and of their achievements, because we know that they are never being shown on television. So they have been trying to give them some spotlight and some attention, which we have always really appreciated. But these times, it is not that they have not. I think most of them, they have shown mourning over the death of Mahsa Amini, but it doesn't seem to be enough in this situation. What people want has elevated so quickly, and they are so tired, and they want such big changes that it might be impossible for players to say anything without facing serious consequences. We know, yeah.
So yeah, just on that then, you know, you're mentioning that. So what is your personal expectation from the national team players in this situation?
I mean, I honestly, I don't think I am like the most, because I don't live in Iran, so of course I don't see myself like as the most important voice here, but I think that for sure I want them to react, to do something as a team. But when that would be, I am not as quick as others in social media to start disowning the team over their silence, for example. We have, I'm sure you have heard or you have some views. Apparently there was a rule in the camp that they shouldn't have done anything about this, but people were like really waiting for maybe a black wristband or something even as small as that, like as a team, but even without words. It could have been enough for people, but as the silence goes on and on, it becomes harder and harder for people to accept this inaction from the players. And we have seen that after Sardar Azmoun has put a series of Instagram stories, like basically protesting what's happening and standing with people. Still, the support to Team Melli has not come back. There are some players who are basically, how call them, like a part of like fundamentalists, like as Mehdi Torabi and Taremi in the past. He has been very pro-establishment. So people have their doubts of accepting Team Melli as a team who is standing next to people. I would definitely think, I mean, and also like Vahid Amiri put something on, which was more as bringing excuse to people being suppressed than it was actually standing as solidarity. So yeah, it's been a mixed, and for sure we did not see any team reaction on this.
I think the one that everyone keeps alluding to, which I actually tweeted about it on my own account, was the whole thing where they wore jackets before the Senegal game.
Yeah,
I don't know personally. Me and Sina will speak about it on the podcast. I just don't know. I don't know whether that was a protest. If I'm being honest, we're saying it was really cold that day. It really was. Like, it was freezing cold. I don't know if that was the. I'm not trying to say that it wasn't a protest. I don't actually know for a fact, but I just don't see much into it. You know, I don't really see it as a protest that you could really point your finger on. You know,
I also saw that Eric Cantona had put that as a story, as like a sign of protest. I don't really know. Everything is going so fast, and everybody's so fast to judge. And personally, I like to hold my judgment, to give them some time, thinking that they are very young. These players most of them are very young. They are in their 20s, and on the other side, you can say that right now, like, people are being, like, young students in Sharif, who is like the MIT of Iran, they are being held at gunpoint in the protest, and someone could argue that they are even more important to Iran than Team Ali, and they are as young as these players, but they are showing a lot of bravery, and they are putting everything from their future to their families online. So it's not strange for me that people have expectations, but I personally would hold my judgment. I wouldn't issue a verdict of a court of public opinion so fast, disown Team Melli, and I would wait for them to come around, even if they are the last.
And now we're seeing some protests by the players who are now playing in foreign leagues, and also some of the players playing in the League of Iran as well. So, you know, that's good to see some of them wearing black wristbands. But maybe that was maybe it was the case they couldn't do it in a national team, and they were very adamant to the players that they can't do that. I don't know. We don't know the situation.
Exactly.
To be honest. Okay, so then obviously going to the World Cup, I think you're going to Qatar as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how
That's
do you
the plan.
how do you feel about that now? Going to Qatar, the player, you know, going to the World Cup. What's your opinion on that?
I mean, I think you know my my journey. You know that I was one of the very first to secure tickets, flights, everything to Qatar. I have had my ticket since March, and I was like really ready for this. I can't lie that I don't feel the same excitement anymore. There are talks of Team Melli being banned from the World Cup. There has been like a human rights group that I think you said is like Open Stadiums, that have urged FIFA to ban Team Melli over violation of human rights. And I think that is, again, a little bit of a complicated thing, because I would not take human rights concerns to FIFA, which is a deeply corrupt institute. And they are holding the World Cup in Qatar, which screams human rights violations, the way that they built the stadiums and everything that the state does. A lot of World Cup, the countries that are in the World Cup, they have problems with the human rights, and I don't think FIFA is going to do that, to be honest. So I don't really see that as a way to go. And in this situation, if Iran going to be there, I don't think I am one of those who will boycott the going to the games and supporting Team Melli. You know me, I am a very hot-headed Team Melli fan. I can't say that I am proud of these players now. I mean, even we were talking about like how the players have been protesting, and even Mehdi Taremi spoke after his match with Porto, and he said that he did not celebrate after his goal because people in his country are mourning. But still, I don't particularly feel very proud of these boys at the moment. My excitement of Kairos returning has come down so much. I'm not particularly looking forward at the moment to going to the World Cup. Maybe it changes, but I see this as an opportunity. I think it is a good stage for us to go and stand together as Iranians. And we are outside Iran, so it is, I think once we are at the stands in the stadium, we can say what we want, we can shout together, and we will have all the cameras in the world to show us. And I think that would be a good stage for us to take our protest there. And then also to show our players what we mean and who we are. So I think it could be an opportunity, and I would for sure use that to be the voice of people in Iran.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. Okay, and then final question. So what do you hope to see from the players going forward, going to the World Cup, in terms of protesting, etc.?
I think what players choose to do or not to do will be remembered for years and years to come. I think these are very important times in our lives. If they score, they show something under their shirt, name of Mahsa Amini, or showing support for their country in any way, people will remember it forever. And I think these are the times that people will choose who is a true legend and who will not be a true legend, even if they go on to score many, many important goals.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Mina. I really appreciate your time and all the insight.
Thank you, Arya, and I hope I will come back to Golbazan on a better time.
All the best. Okay, we're back. Appreciate Mina's time for that. Finally, just a couple of points before we finish off. Obviously, there's been reports of an arrest of Hossein Mahini, who obviously used to play for the national team, right back for the national team. Obviously, plays at Persepolis as well. I think he played for Zobohan as well for a little while. He's been arrested for being supposedly, because he was outspoken on social media, and that's been similar to Ali Karimi's situation, has been arrested. I don't know the extent as to what actually has happened with him, and whether he's back out of arrest, if he's still in. We don't know. We don't have any more information, but that's what was given. We just hope that he's safe. And Cover Rizai as well. Again, not confirmed Some reports says he has, some reports says he hasn't been arrested. Again, similarly, I think it was because of I think it was a killing or something to do with the Kurdish region of Iran. Again, unconfirmed, but hopefully that gets resolved soon so we can know the information and the extent of it. And yeah, final point from you, Sina, is I want to know whether Iran are going to get banned from the World Cup. We just saw a statement from Open Stadiums on Twitter. What do you think of that? Final point.
I don't think Iran will get banned from the World Cup. I think the way that FIFA works is that they obviously take decisions based on events, and the way, I mean, I guess a parallel you could take is the way that they handled the whole like Russia situation. There was a long time with a lot of pressure. That was when they started sort of like, at first they made the decision of like, oh, you can still play some games, you just can't play all of them. But then eventually, because of public pressure, they decided that they can't play any games. Given how slow they were to react to that, I don't think we'll get banned from the World Cup. I know there's been a lot of pressure, given, you know, women in stadiums and things like that. There has been pressure, of course. I just don't see it happening, to be honest with this. I think our players, they turn up for the games. That's the thing. If these games were cancelled, then maybe it would have been a different matter. But I just don't see it getting. I don't see us getting banned. I don't know. What do you think?
So this comes as obviously as a result of the open letter by Open Stadiums, which is a Twitter account that is a movement to allow to seek the end of discrimination and let women to attend stadiums. That's what they're actually doing. But their statement or their letter to FIFA is in regards to the violation of human rights. And they believe that as a result of the human rights violations, that Iran should then be banned from the World Cup because FIFA have their own you know, if you violate certain things, they will get banned, and that's how it works. And for FIFA, it's a difficult one because I think FIFA don't have the means to answer those questions, and I think if they do end up banning Iran from the 2022 World Cup, they're going to have a lot of issues because people are going to be protesting, and it would really be bad for them in terms of a security risk. Because I think there will be more protests, you know. But then, you know, then again, if, for example, you know, hoping it doesn't happen, if Iran's situation gets worse, does that mean then they have no other choice but to ban Iran from the World Cup? I don't know. This is something that is hard to dispel at this point. I don't know what you think, Sina.
FIFA is a very dirty organization, and I'll publicly say that. I don't like them whatsoever. And I think for them, it's easier to turn a blind eye to all of this goings on, just like how they've turned a blind eye to the people dying constructing the stadiums in Qatar. So I don't think we'll get banned for that reason. Whether it's just or right for us to get banned is another debate. But whether FIFA would ban us, I don't think we'll get banned.
Okay, thanks for that, Sina. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the time of the people that we had on to interview for this podcast. I hope everyone got a good understanding of our experience in Vienna. And I hope that you guys maybe learned something that you hadn't learned before regarding the national team. And we will be back very soon with more podcasts if we can. Hopefully we'll do some more leading up to the World Cup as well. And yeah, all the best.
Cheers. Thank you so much, guys.